Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and pull back the curtain on something we've all experienced. Have you ever wondered why you learned exactly what you learned in school? Well, it wasn't an accident. Behind every textbook, every pop quiz is a highly structured architectural blueprint that secretly designs your classroom learning experiences. Today, we're going to demystify exactly how that curriculum is built, from the ground up.
Here is what we're covering today. First, the blueprints, looking at core models. Second, foundations, exploring rationale and philosophy. Third, setting sights on curriculum goals. And finally, number 4, who decides what we learn.
All right, jumping right into section 1, the blueprints, core models. We've got to start with Ralph Tyler's 1949 rationale model. This is your classic, strict, linear approach to planning. It's a highly behavioral model focused entirely on 4 straight sequential steps. Step 1, define your objectives. Basically, what educational purposes does the school want to achieve? Step 2, select the learning experiences that'll help hit those targets. Step 3, organize those experiences. And step 4, evaluation. Did you systematically meet those initial goals? It's goal-oriented, it's systematic, and it is strictly sequential. But now, look at the tension here between 2 totally different educational mindsets. Because if Tyler's model is a strict, rigid, almost robotic blueprint, Decker Walker's approach is, well, it's a lot more like a messy, dynamic design meeting. Walker recognized that in the real world, people don't just mechanically follow 4 neat steps. They debate, they argue, and they adapt. So, Walker's naturalistic model actually relies on 3 collaborative phases. It kicks off with a platform. Think of this as the stage where curriculum developers bring all their existing beliefs, theories, and biases right to the table. Next up is the deliberations phase. This is where stakeholders actually hash it out, debating alternatives and adapting based on practical, real-world situations. And only after that very human process of negotiation do they reach the final design. It's a consensus-driven approach to classroom instruction. Alternatively, we have a third approach, the backward design model. And this one completely flips the script, literally. Instead of starting with activities or picking out textbooks, it asks you to identify your end learning goals first. What do you want the learners to know at the very end? Once you lock that in, you move backward to step 2, which is figuring out your assessment strategies. How will you prove they actually learned it? And then, only in the very last step, do you design the instructional materials and the day-to-day learning activities. But wait a second. Before any of these models, Tyler's, Walker's, or backward design, can actually be applied, how do educators know what kind of educational house they're supposed to be building in the first place? How do they justify the content? That brings us to section 2, foundations, rationale, and philosophy. It all starts with the curriculum rationale. You can think of this as the ultimate defense of a subject's existence. It answers one huge, fundamental question. Why is this curriculum necessary? And a solid rationale doesn't just guess. It's grounded in hard data, national goals, and real-world realities. It's the bridge linking what society needs with the development of the learner, acting as the bedrock justification for why this specific knowledge matters right now. Let's look at a practical example. A primary school's STEM curriculum uses this exact rationale to justify its existence. It explicitly states that its purpose isn't just about memorizing facts, but to nurture curiosity, creativity, and critical thinking. This coherent explanation proves the core mission is about preparing kids for future life challenges, which justifies the resources spent on teaching it. Now, if the rationale is the why, the curriculum philosophy dictates the how. These are the deeply held beliefs and values that underpin the whole educational experience. Your philosophy dictates if a classroom is going to be strict and traditional, focusing on timeless classics and core skills, or if it'll be more dynamic and student-focused, emphasizing hands-on learning. It literally decides what knowledge is valued most and how learning is ultimately assessed. Take grade 8 social studies as a mini narrative, where we see a student-centered philosophy in action. Remember when you actually got to stage a mock trial in school instead of just quietly reading about the law? Well, that is a highly learner-centered philosophy grounded in the belief that education should focus on the whole child. Instead of just lecturing, it emphasizes learning by doing. Through document analysis, debates, and civic simulations, students are actively trained for democratic citizenship. Moving right along to section 3, setting sights, curriculum goals. Goals are those broad, general statements about what the curriculum actually intends to achieve. They give us the ultimate direction for selecting content. Going back to our grade 8 social studies example, we can see these goals clearly mapped out.
They ensure learners do things like examine the transatlantic slave trade to build historical understanding, while also interpreting spatial data to foster geographic awareness. And this really highlights a major shift. Modern curriculum goals aren't just about forcing students to memorize isolated facts. They are intentionally designed to support personal development. By connecting past events directly to present-day social realities, the curriculum aims to cultivate informed citizens, people who can question injustices, develop empathy, and take on active roles in their communities. Which leads us to our final part, Section 4, Who Decides What We Learn? It is absolutely fascinating to look at the varied levels of influence different groups have on curriculum development. You might assume everyone in a school system has an equal say, but the data reveals a rigid, undeniable hierarchy of power, ranging from very high influence down to surprisingly low influence. At the very top, the heavy hitters holding high influence are the government and ministries of education, who mandate the curriculum policies to align with political and economic goals. Right alongside them are the curriculum developers, who draft the actual frameworks. But perhaps most crucially, and this is huge, the examination boards hold massive power. By determining the focus of the big assessments, they indirectly dictate exactly what gets emphasized in teaching every single day. Operating with moderate influence, we have the teachers. While they interpret the curriculum and select examples daily, their influence is largely confined to their own classrooms. Joining them in this middle tier are the textbook publishers who supply the physical materials, and regional or international bodies like CXC or UNESCO who set broader global standards. But here is the real shocker. The actual residents of the educational house, the students and the parents, often have the lowest level of direct influence on the curriculum content. Parents might pack the lunches and show up to the PTA meetings, and students can advocate for their interests, sure, but their structural power absolutely pales in comparison to those systemic, top-down mandates from the government and exam boards. The people most impacted by the curriculum are the ones with the least say in its design. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought as we wrap up this explainer. As you reflect on your own learning experiences, how many of those pivotal, mind-expanding moments in the classroom were actually decided by invisible architects you've never even met? Think about it. Until next time, keep questioning the blueprint.